Good afternoon, all, and thank you for joining us for another Secret Sunday session today. Today, I'm joined by Steve Johnson, and I'm very excited because Steve is very qualified in this area that we are talking about today, which we're going to dive into well-being concepts, as well as self-care and also therapies. There are so many therapies out there, what works for some people and what may not work for others. So it's going to be a very informative session, and I'm excited to get started. But to kick us off, as always, Steve, if you just want to give us a little introduction about who you are and what is it that you are doing.
Thanks, Ashley. Great to be here with you today. My name is Steve Johnson. As Ashley mentioned, I'm CEO of the Wellbeing Science Institute, and we basically help communities, organisations, or individuals with their whole person wellbeing. So we focus on the things that people can do, the positive things that people can do that make a difference to their personal well-being, but also to the well-being of the people in their lives that really matter. So we run courses, we run programs, we advise companies, but fundamentally what we're trying to do is help people improve their whole person well-being.
Yeah.
So in terms of training, I'm a psychologist by profession. Started out as a personal trainer.
Wow.
So when I was at uni, so that was the way I paid my way through uni, by being a personal trainer. I guess that was where I really learned how important taking care of oneself is, and learning how rewarding it is to help people, take care of their well-being. So that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. Now, you talked a lot about whole person well-being. I mean, in the media, in social media, kind of the realm that we're all living in, well-being is such a big topic, but I've never heard the concept as frequently used called whole person well-being. So what is that?
Well, maybe if we start for me at the beginning, when we say well-being, what we mean is to move toward our whole person potential and live our life in a valued way, which means living our life in alignment with our values. So in other words, if you feel like life is heading in the direction that matters to you, the things that are important to you, if you're heading in that direction and you're living in alignment with your values, we say, well, that's well-being. And sometimes the goal of well-being is to end up flourishing, which is feeling good and functioning well. But of course, things don't always go to plan. And so then we think, all right, well, what can we do? And when we think about what can we do, that's when we think about the whole person. And often we get our blinkers on and we start thinking about one aspect of ourselves. So when we think about whole person, we come at it from what's called a bio-psycho-social perspective. What that means is a biological perspective, a psychological and emotional perspective, and a social perspective. And in fact, we've sort of extended it out and said it should actually be an eco perspective as well. So things like values, understanding our values and strengths, understanding how to take care of ourselves physically, understanding how to take care of ourselves psychologically and emotionally, understanding the importance of relationships, understanding the importance of spirituality. Maybe culture is really important to us. And for some people, culture is really more important than others. Making a difference in our community, feeling connected to our community. Maybe it's about finances because don't have enough money, or families struggling with money. Or could just be about study or work or careers. So any of those areas, we say, that's what we mean by whole person.
Yeah, wow.
But the key thing is, I think that not all those things are all important in the same way for everybody. So one of the things we work hard on is saying, by asking people, what's important to you? And then let's focus on those things. Because the best well-being comes when we decide for ourselves.
Yeah.
So one of our goals is to really try and empower people to, one, understand well-being, and then two, make some decisions for them that really matter to them. They're in alignment with what's important to them, in alignment with their values. And what we find is when people make those decisions, they're much more comfortable with those decisions, they're much more committed to them. And at the end of the day, they usually get better outcomes.
And when we talk about values and understanding what is important to that person, how do you know that? How do people know what's important to them or what they value?
Well, I've asked this question to teenagers, I've asked this question to adults thousands of times, and I always get amazed by how much in common people have from being a teenager to being an adult. And people, if you ask people what's really important to you, they tend to say the same 6 to 8 things. And if I was to ask you, what are the 6 to 8 things that are important, what would you say?
Probably family is number one.
And people always say family, of course,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what else?
Family, health, I
Yeah,
would say
people.
relationships as well,
Yeah,
socializing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, nature. I don't know if that's one of them, but just getting outside.
Increasingly, people, when we ask that question, people say nature because one, they're concerned about the environment and the lack of action on climate, and so they're concerned about that. But they also realize how rejuvenating spending time in nature is. So people often say that. They might say work or study, or they might say finances. So people tend to say the same things. And what that reminds me of is, as human beings, we have all this stuff in common, but often we forget that and we start focusing, we go inward and we focus on ourselves, not realizing there's all these connections that we have in common with other people. And we're all trying to do the same thing, which is trying to feel good about ourselves.
Why do you think we all have that desire and that need to feel good about ourselves?
I think it's fundamental to our biology. I think if you look at evolutionary psychology, we were able to be connected to other people for survival. And if we hadn't have been able to have those connections with others, we wouldn't have survived. So I think it goes way back, and it's connected in us both physically, psychologically, neurologically, and even in our chemical makeup. When we're close to people and we feel safe, it releases neurotransmitters which make us feel good. So it's hardwired into us.
Yeah. And then if we spoke about that concept of flourishing earlier, what does that look like? And is that different for everybody?
Yeah, I think it is. Flourishing to me just means feeling good and functioning well. And if you're feeling good and functioning well, then everything about you is more optimistic, is more positive. You feel safer. You feel like life is going well. But that's not always the case for people. So the research tells us around 15% of people are flourishing. And that's a pretty low number, right?
Yes.
Now, what it doesn't mean is that the rest have a mental illness. What it does mean is they probably have moderate mental health. But what we also know is that the most protective thing we can do for our mental health, for example, is to develop the skills of flourishing.
Yeah.
So, and that's protective against having poor mental health. But it's also the thing that even if we get, if we fall back into a place where we're not going well, where we're languishing, we'll bounce back faster.
Yeah.
So what amazes me is the fact that we spend so little time and effort into helping people acquire the skills of flourishing.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a stigma attached to flourishing? Because sometimes people assume that people that are flourishing have kind of got an ego, if that makes sense, or they're pushing that they're too outgoing or they're up themselves.
I think people one, don't understand what the skills of flourishing are, and then secondly, I think they get mixed messages from people who actually know what an evidence-based approach to wellbeing is and what they read and see on social media. And social media, obviously plays a huge role in people's thoughts, their feelings and actions, because social media platforms only have one goal, and that is profitability. And so their goal is to feed back to you what their analytics are telling you, what you're interested in.
No,
And
I
so,
completely understand that.
and that's getting a long way from where we are as human beings, and getting a long way from us as people.
So if we look at the steps to flourishing, in your opinion, in your practice, what are those steps?
I think the first thing is working out what's really important. Working out what really matters to you as an individual. And that can be as simple as, writing a list, writing down a list of the things that, really matter to you, and trying to focus on those things and take the actions that you believe will contribute to getting more of those things in your life. And that could be about as simple as, what am I spending my time doing? And it's really interesting when I ask people, how do you spend your time? And then you look at that list, and if you allocate your time either over a day or a week or a month, how much time did you spend focusing on the things that really matter? Well, often people, when they do that, go, actually, it's really amazing. I'm not focusing on things that really matter. The other thing I would say that people don't focus on a lot is self-care. Often self-care, taking care of oneself by, getting good sleep, exercising well, eating nutritional food, spending time on the things that really matter, connecting with people who you care about, making a difference to other people, doing those things are actually good for us. But often self-care, it can be seen as selfish. And in fact, it's the most important thing if we're sort of on that journey to flourishing, is you've got to get the basics in place first. Because if you're not feeling good, then it makes it very hard to have good relationships, be a good brother or sister, or son or a daughter, or and let alone be functioning in other areas of your external life, like at work or at school or university. So self-care is really important.
I think as well, in this era, everyone is busy, and a lot of people would argue, well, I just don't have time for that. Do you think that self-care should be implemented every day, and how can busy people implement it in their life?
Yeah, I think busyness is one of the great myths in our society.
I agree.
Busyness is people tend to think busyness equals effectiveness or productivity. Busyness just is business. Now, my question when people say, I don't have time, I ask them, what's really important? Have you got enough time for the things that are really important? And in being busy, what are you spending time being busy on?
Okay. Wow. So can some people, even if they are in, let's just use the word busy, in a busy work environment where they're working long hours, they come home, they're depleted, have no energy, they're tired, should we still be pushing that self-care is important, or for them to go out and exercise, or them to nutritionally look after their body, even if they've had this massive day and they're like, well, I can't be bothered, I've got nothing left in the tank?
Well, I think you raise a really great point, is that people, when they work extremely long hours, they're also of this view that more is better, and we know that's not the case. And increasingly, organizations are working this out. Is that people aren't machines. They have finite amounts of energy, and actually giving people time for restoration, rejuvenation, relaxation, and connection is actually empowering people on one hand, but on the other hand, it makes them more productive. So smart companies are working this out and saying, look, there's no point having you in the office here for 16 hours, or it's no point you studying for 17 hours a day, because it won't go in, or you won't be as productive. You'll make mistakes at work. So why would you want to do that? And then what happens when people burn out? Well, there's a cost to that. There's a human cost, There's a psychological cost, there's a relational cost, and ultimately there's a societal cost to that. But smart companies are working this out finally, that if we treat people as humans and we provide an environment where, you know, they can give their best, where we provide psychologically safe environments, where we don't yell at people, we don't scream at them, we don't lie to them, we treat them decently, and we say, hey, look, why don't you go home? Why don't you have a day off? Why don't you go and take a break?
Mm-hmm.
You know, those kind of things are the things that organizations are now starting to think about. And I think COVID has fast-tracked that.
Yeah, for sure.
We get a lot of companies really rethinking about what well-being means in the workplace, and it's no longer just about fruit boxes and you know and step counters and those kind of things. They're trying to do things of real substance.
Yeah. Do you think that the times have changed? Because back in, you know, the 19th century, or even the 18th century, work environments were tough and people would work long hours, but you didn't hear about the issues or the mental health issues that we're experiencing now. So what has changed, and why should we be changing our workplace environment when prior it seemed to work out fine?
I think in the past, organizations had the means of production. So in other words, you know, there was a big push from, we used to be an agrarian society where it was all about, you know, working in the fields and producing that, sharing the food, the fruits of the labor. But then we went into this sort of mechanistic production world. But in order to have that, we needed machines and needed capital. But we're in the era now of knowledge work where workers themselves have much more control. Of course, technology plays a role, but judgment becomes increasingly important. So therefore, the power has shifted a lot between who has the vital resource. And when it comes to thinking, it's human beings who have that vital resource. So I think that's been one key driver. I think another key driver is people in this busyness and in all these expectations, and increasingly, you know, families where, you know, either couples work or, you know, everybody works, that takes its toll as well. And I think to be honest, I think we've been locked into this idea that more is better all the time. More money, bigger houses, those kind of things. But in truth, if we start to look at Indigenous society, we start to go, wow, I think you guys had a lot of things right.
Oh, definitely. I find myself in the trap sometimes where you have everything that you could possibly want and everything that you possibly need, but still you see a photo, you see someone else that's bought this new car, they've got this new house, they've just got married. You're like, oh my God, my life is awful because everyone else has this grand stuff and you want to have the new in things, but at the end of the day, what you have is enough.
Yeah, and I think to me, that's what's making you and the people you care about feel good, function well. And if you've got that, because interestingly, the evidence says is once you earn around $80,000 a year, more money doesn't make you happier.
Wow.
So if happiness is the goal, well, more money is not going to do it.
Yeah. And I feel like that's our society now. We are such a money-driven society, and that's what's been pushed on us.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I think I've never had someone come into my office and say, look, you know, I'm feeling great because I got all this money.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen
much. Yeah, no. Yeah.
So
and with this talk as well, I know that you talk to a lot of different people, but when we talk about self-care, I feel like it's being pushed a lot in the female space. Females are starting to incorporate a lot more and think about it more intuitively. How are men receiving self-care messages?
I don't think they are yet. Yeah. And that's raised an issue. So why is that? Well, I think we still have very, I think younger people your age are starting to get the message. I think the push on mindfulness is sort of helping with that. But mindfulness is really, paying attention. If you sort of draw it all back. It's just really paying attention. And I think men have got a long way to go when it comes to self-care.
Definitely. It's great to see that it is being pushed a lot, but still, I just find there's a little stigma attached to men and kind of it being a feminine thing, and it's hard to break that. And it's amazing that even in your space you still struggle to push that onto men as well.
I think Australia particularly is a very patriarchal society still. You see that in equality, you see that in pay, you see that in housework. And because Australia is still a very patriarchal society, there's clear, in a lot of men's minds, clear division. Not all men, but a lot of men, clear division between the world of women and the world of men. And you've only got to go to a social gathering to see that in action.
In your opinion, how do you change that?
Well, again, I think education plays a role, and I think people listening to their own values and listening to their own hearts, and actually, thinking about themselves as a person, less as male or female. Not to deny that you're, male or female or anywhere in between, but it's more about thinking, what have we all got in common? Thinking about the common humanity. And my observation is the one thing we all have in common is that we all want to feel good about ourselves.
It is. I feel like if we all definitely have that in common, and we all do desire that. I want to switch a little bit now to talking about therapies, because there is a lot of therapies out there. There's CBT, DBT, as well as so many others that can be quite confusing for someone that is mentally ill, or someone that just needs to implement that in their life. What is your experience with the therapies, and firstly, what are they?
Well, anybody who's looking for a therapist or for therapies should really think about what their personal needs are, and then how can they get a referral to a person who is really going to connect with them as a person firstly, and then what kind of training and qualifications and expertise does this person bring to the table that's going to make a difference in their life. As you mentioned, there's a wide variety of possibilities here. And so my advice would be consult an expert organization. So for example, if you're looking for a therapist, I would go to the Australian Psychological Society. They've got a find a therapist search engine where you can find a search engine, you can enter some keywords, identify what the issues are, and you can find a therapist in your area who has that area of specialization. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. Find an expert, find someone who's qualified, and find someone who's registered. Because at a minimum, what you know then is they've done the work, they've done the training, and they've provided evidence of a commitment to learning. It's not to say that people outside those qualified registered organizations can't be effective, because they can. In a lot of cases they are, but you kind of take some of the risk out when you go to a professional organization. The government has a national register. There's a psychology registration board. People have to meet not only certain educational requirements, certain skill requirements, but they have to do certain continuing professional development. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. Then, depending on what issues people are facing, the therapy should fit the issues that people want resolution for. My other comment would be about most of psychology has the goal of alleviating suffering. And my comment on that as a psychologist would be, that's not enough. My goal would be that the person is moving into flourishing not just no longer suffering. And I think that's where psychology has a lot of work to do. I think therapists definitely can make a difference in people's lives when they have a mental illness or they're really languishing and they want to get back to not having a mental illness. But just to be really clear, just because someone doesn't have a mental illness doesn't mean they're mentally healthy.
Yeah, you can still be in that moderate zone.
Yeah, and because of that, we don't do enough. And if you look at where all the funding in this country goes, it goes into mental ill health. Well, that's probably about 15% of people. What about the big majority of people in the middle? And then we come back to that. How do we take care of ourselves physically, psychologically, emotionally, and socially? So, for example, one of the things I think is really important is self-awareness. Being aware of who one is, thinking about our thinking styles, the way our self-talk works, how much attention I pay to what's going on in my body, how connected I am to my values, to my family, to my friends, to my community. So I call that the ABCs. The A is awareness, the B is my body, and C is connection. And if I'm focusing on the ABCs, then I tend to be heading beyond just doing okay. I'm actually heading in that direction of flourishing.
I think, a lot of people sit in that moderate section and say, well, I'm not mentally ill, so I don't need to go see a psychologist, but I'm happy just to sit in the comfortable, where they still desire flourishing, but they never know how to pursue it.
Well, again, I think sometimes when you go and see a psychologist, and that being to be critical, but when you go and see a psychologist, often what you get is the medical model. So you get a very medical view of the world, and so we'll do a diagnosis and we'll do some tests, and then we'll come out and we'll do these particular strategies, and then there'll come a time where you'll be feeling better, and then then we move on. But the reality is that most people, when they see a therapist, will attend for 3 or 4 sessions. And my view is that often broadening out that idea of not just focusing on that medical model, actually focusing on the whole person and thinking about what's really important to that person, and allowing that person to come to an awareness themselves about what really matters, and helping them develop the knowledge and skills for their whole life, not just their mental life or their emotional life, but their whole life, yields much more positive outcomes. And then the challenge in that situation for the helper is to help the person with the process of change from where we are now to where we'd like to be. And I think that's quite a different perspective to, for example, how psychologists are trained. Yeah.
If you look at your ABCs that you mentioned, how do you be self-aware in your everyday and listen to your body, as well as listen to the self-talk that you have in your head? How do you become aware?
Well, I think the first thing is paying attention to what's going on, and realizing in the awareness space that sometimes our self-talk, which is really there to keep us safe and to keep us aware of what's going on in our external environments, to keep us safe, but our self-talk starts to become our self-critic, and it starts to undermine us because it gets in this comfortable pattern of behavior and starts telling us things through black and white thinking, or making should statements, or global labeling. So it's all these what are called cognitive biases that we start to put back on ourselves. So we start to judge ourselves unnecessarily, unfairly, and out of context. Where I made one mistake, therefore I'm a bad person, or I'm having trouble with this, I'm dumb, or like just these thought patterns which are really unhelpful. So the first thing on that awareness piece is recognizing when your self-talk starts to become unhelpful, and then stopping it and saying, hey, you're not helping me with that talk. That's not going to be productive. That's not going to help me get what's really important to me. So I'm not going to listen to you today. So, you can do things like you can have a conversation with yourself and say, I'm not going to listen to you. You can mock the self-talk. You can make fun of it. You can make a joke of it. Or you can say you're fired. I'm not listening to you today. I'm listening to the other girl, the one that really cares about me. So, just playing those little games with yourself can be really helpful.
Do you
so
find
the
that,
first thing is you've got to notice it.
Yeah. Do you find that some people prefer to sit in that negative self-talk? They get comfortable and they're actually scared of flourishing?
I think sometimes we get comfortable in a pattern of behavior. And it's a bit like an old shoe, you put it on, it feels comfortable. Well, then who would I be if I was to take this risk? Or who would I be if, I was feeling good and functioning well? What would people think of me? Would I be the same person? So again, what it requires, I think, is being really aware of what's going on for yourself and others. I think paying attention to our body particularly, because our body to me is like the early warning system, like it's incoming. Before it even happens in your head, it's happening in your body. Because most of our information in our brain comes from our bodies, not the other way around. It's not sort of central command, it's body sending messages back. So if we pay attention to that, then that gives us the tip off. And then we can go, okay, something's going on, whether it be, feeling in the tummy or, something around the chest, or you notice your breathing gets slightly tighter, or heart rate, so you notice those things. And then if you think about the context, what's going on here? So being able to zoom out a little bit can be really helpful sometimes.
Yeah, wow.
But your body is because your brain's job is not for thinking. Most people think their brain's primary job is thinking. It's not, it's predicting. Your body's job, we have a big brain because you've got a very complicated body. So it's trying to work out all the time how to manage the load that your whole body's carrying. So we can influence our thinking very easily.
It's how do you tell that to a young person that may not feel as in control of the thoughts that come into their head, or if they do get that negative and positive self-talk and they're really confused? How do you push that messaging to a young person?
Well, again, I think it's I think it's helping young people decide for themselves that they've got stuff that's important to them too. And if you ask a young person what's really important to them, I'll tell you what they'll say. They'll say mum or dad, or mum and dad, or my carer, whoever that might be. They'll say my siblings. They'll say school, and if school's going okay for them. They'll say my friends, maybe my pet. So they'll have things that are important to them. And they'll also know that sometimes their thinking gets in the way of them feeling good. And so with young people, they'll also be very attuned with their body, much more so than adults. And what I've found with young kids, I've worked with young kids, and teaching them some really basic skills around breathing and relaxing, and some mental skills around how to think about self-talk. The same principles apply even for young kids. In fact, there's a great book written by Louise Hayes and Joe Carocci, which is called Get Out of Your Mind and Get Into Your Life, which is a great, and it's based on principles of acceptance and commitment therapy. And again, it's the same sort of thing, thinking about what's really important for you. And instead of having ABCs, what they have is they have an advisor, they have a noticer, and they have a developer. and the developer is developing skills. So the advisor is self-talk, the noticer is paying attention, and the developer is about developing skills. But they call it the DNA V model. And the V, of course, again, stands for values.
Wow.
But I'd highly recommend that book. I think that's an awesome book. And Joe Croce, he's a professor at Australian Catholic University, and Louise Hayes is at Origin in Melbourne. She's a clinical psychologist. That's an awesome book if people are really struggling with, how do I get out of my head and stop that negative self-talk and start acting more in alignment with what I really want.
Mm. So if we talk about negative self-talk and people that are mentally ill, what's going on in their head in terms of if you're depressed, if you've got anxiety, or even in my case, when I had my eating disorder, when you have, or your head is just full of those negative voices, what is going on in the head, and why is it so hard to hear that positive self-talk?
I think because what often it means we get on a loop, and then we start implementing all these cognitive biases or these attribution errors in our mind. And so our thinking becomes unhelpful to us. But we're so immersed in the emotion that thinking has brought that we can't think our way out of it. So, and in order to stop that thinking, we need to do something that slows us down or separates us from that thinking, or introduces us to another person who can take us out of our head and get us more into our body. So I think we can do what would be a top-down strategy, which is learning some skills around different ways of thinking. We can do a bottom-up strategy, which is learning how to better regulate our bodies by breathing, meditation, using some other physical strategies. Exercise is an awesome one. Cold water is an awesome one too. Or getting connected with people who we feel safe with and who we really care about. And another one, which is, I think, really important, and it's been shown to significantly reduce stress, is to do good for others. And we call it pro-social behavior, but it's actually, at the end of the day, doing good for other people, because that gets us out of our own head and actually makes a difference to other people, which we can then see, which then in turn makes us feel good as well. And just for that period of time, we've got out of our head, we've got out of our emotions, we've done something productive, which is probably in alignment with our values, and we end up feeling good about ourselves.
Yeah. A lot of people say, I remember going through my recovery, just ignore them, just shut them out. I don't see it as that easy, but I want to ask you, is it that easy? Just ignore them, just distract yourself and just move on?
Well, I think that would be an avoidance strategy. And for some people, that will work. But for others, that won't work. And then, so I think it's important, you've got to have a repertoire of possibilities and then choose the repertoire that works for you. For some people, it might be, self-care is really important. So just, take the time to focus on your self-care. And when you're ready, you can slowly start to do some different things. For others, it might be, right, I'm going to go into this 100%. I'm going to focus on my whole person well-being, going to set some goals, and I'm going to focus on the future. So it has to be a personal choice. And that's the risk, I think, for a lot of people, is when they hear there's one solution. The best solution is the solution that works for that particular person. And it's even better solution if the person is able to make the decision themselves. But sometimes we're in the midst of the turmoil, it's very hard to even make a decision. And that's where, having people around a person who cares about them, who shows them love and kindness and compassion, who doesn't put too much pressure on them, but allows them the space to to feel and slowly connect at their pace. So I think often, and social media is fantastic at this as well. If there's one solution, it's the best solution. Everybody should have the solution.
Yes, it's actually the worst at it. It convinces you that there's one size that fits all, and really there's definitely not. And I think we've proven that throughout society that there isn't one answer for the same thing. We need to go out there and explore it and find what does work for us, which is, it can be hard as well in such an information dense society when there is so much information out there. You don't even know where to start.
No, and people often also ask me a lot about, what do you think I should be doing, with my life, or what should I study, or what sort of work should I do? And they're always looking out there, and you can guess what my advice is.
Look in here.
Look in here. The answer's in here. And if you spend enough time, don't rush it. Be patient with it. Don't expect it's going to drop in the mailbox or your inbox tomorrow. But just keep working at it. I mean, the most interesting thing in the world are our own thoughts, feelings, observations, and values. So spend some time on them.
Yeah, it is phenomenal. Especially, I have a lot of young people that go, I don't know what to do with my life. Like, I'm supposed to know what career I want to enter into. Well, it's like, look back at, what do you like doing? If you had a day where you could do whatever you want, what do you like doing? And can you turn that into a career?
Yeah, totally agree. And, what gives you joy on the inside? What kind of people you like spending time with? If you go into a bookstore, what section would you go to? What kind of TV shows you like watching? So they're all clues.
Yeah.
How do you spend your time during the day?
That's actually very interesting. I love the book and TV show idea, especially because a lot of us do it now. Are you watching the crime genres or the drama? That is such a good idea. So take that away, people.